Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. It turns out, looks like Disney's Snow White live-action disastrous dumpster fire is coming down the pipeline and will end up costing this company hundreds of millions of dollars, if not borderline $1 billion, in between the marketing and how much the costs have already ballooned. And guess what, boys and girls? This movie is not done yet. Yes, of course, Disney is. We've been hearing a lot of rumors about Disney trying to course correct, about trying to change things right now, and it looks like they are trying to do the exact same with Snow White and the 7 CGI characters out there, because it's rumored that they are doing massive reshoots, massive changes. There's been a third round of reshoots on this movie, and they are still trying to course correct before this movie comes out there. This is going to end up being on par with the Rise of Palpatine kind of movies, where we end up finding out from the final tax documents from the UK out there, this movie probably cost them over $500 million, if not even more than that, by the time this thing is all said and done. And that is absolutely lines up perfectly with what we have seen time and time again with the Walt Disney Company. The initial trade magazines reported this movie would cost them $300 million. But even from the initial tax filings that we've seen so already, it is already way over that. This movie is going to turn into a disastrous dumpster fire. It is going to cost the Walt Disney Company hundreds of millions of dollars if this budget ends up being true, which I'm sure will probably end up being absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt true. And it will just show Disney once again the error of their ways and the direction they have trying to go. And guess what? For a lot of fans out there, it's going to be way too little, way too late, and this movie will turn into a disastrous dumpster fire and will probably end up being on the level of the Marvels movie when it all comes out, if not even worse. Let's see what happens with this, boys and girls. So we're going to check out this article from thatparkplace.com. Getting all the juicy details of what our scooper out there is giving us a rundown on what this budget is looking like just so far, which will probably end up getting worse. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Would it surprise you at all that this number is absolutely right? Or do you think Disney is actually trying to hold back on some of this stuff? Or is this going to be a disastrous dumpster fire coming in the waiting? Let us know what you think about all that down below. So the budget for Disney's live-action Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler, reportedly exploded to over $500 million. You know, the basically essentially race swap Snow White, you know, the Snow Brown and the 7 Dinglebats that we're going to get for this one. The budget for the Walt Disney Company's live-action Snow White film, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, is rumored to have exploded to over $500 million. And yeah, I mean, the whole idea of casting Rachel Zegler and trying to sell it to an audience that she is more fair than Gal Gadot, yeah, needless to say, that blew up in their faces as well. In a recent video uploaded, which the author appeared, WW Pro shared, I'm told that there have been 3 reshoots of this film and that Disney is now still working to fix things. And in particular, there are 2 areas that Disney is working to resolve before its release in March, which is just a few months away. They are going to be scrambling until literally this movie comes out. And we have seen how much that has failed in the past. We know The Flash was like this, that they were working on things right up until the last minute. We've seen Disney's movies out there and television shows. We've seen their CGI suffer from this kind of thing because they were working up until the last minute, whether that be She-Hulk, or we got the reports of, well, they were literally changing things on the fly. Same thing with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. They were literally changing things for days of. And anybody that knows how CGI works knows these people need hours, they need weeks, they need months to make these things look as beautiful and fabulous as what they actually can. But when you're constantly changing things on the fly, that makes it an impossible task to do that for. Unlike what James Gunn claims they were doing over there at DC. See how that works out for him here. From there, WWE showed 2 major problems that Disney is attempting to fix. First, you know that the dwarfs have been roundedly mocked, and they've been mocked at the level of the original Sonic the Hedgehog model in that film. And it's funny because there was even a report from Screen Rant that said a group of VXF artists come out there and literally roasted how abysmally bad these dwarves looked because of the Uncanny Valley effect and like all kinds of other things. This was put out there by Screen Rant, one of the little access media simps for the spirit of the age, and even they are allowing this movie to get ragged by their own sources out there. So the dwarves have been roundly mocked, and at the level of the original Sonic the Hedgehog and model in that film. Of course, Sega and Paramount went back to work and redid the entire model. They literally spent like a year fixing things. And guess what? Now they have a very successful franchise on their hands that just continues to spawn movie after movie and even some television shows. So shout out to them for being smart on that one. Redid the entire film to make the character look like it does in the video games. Well, you're not going to make Rachel Zegler look like the original Snow White, no matter how hard you try on CGI. Well, the one thing is they're not going to have that much time to do everything that needs to be done, and they have 7 models that need to be adjusted. Yeah, they're literally on the crunch time. They have like less than 6 months to fix all of this, and that is not going to happen. The other thing is that apparently they're going to try to adjust the color palette, the atmospherics of the movie, to make it brighter and more lighthearted and make it more child-friendly. It is deemed a little too dark, and I know when we talked about the trailers, when we went over them and talked about them on our live streams, it was one of them situations where literally we know why they make these things darker. It's to hide poor CGI and poor quality work, because that's what we saw with the Little Mermaid, which went from, of course, a bright spectacle in the original source material out there to a dark and grim thing out there, which, like I said, we know why they do this. The VXF artists have told us they make things darker to cover up crappy CGI, which is probably exactly what they were doing here as well. So Pro then declared, the big story about all of this is that Disney apparently is trying to get this movie ready to go on the cheap. And the reason that might be done on the cheap is because they're already done 3 reshoots. We heard about the casting call to pull in a younger version of Rachel Zegler and Snow White, so that way we wouldn't have to see her as much on the screen. These are all rumors that have lined up with what we've heard in the past. We know this film had a budget that was somewhere around $300 million, but they have overshot that significantly according to my source. And this film is now heading towards For the Force Awakens and Rise of Palpatine, which, like we talked about at the beginning of the series, turns out it ended up having $650 million in cost after we found out what the actual tax returns were on that. So he says, that's what I'm going to call it. That kind of budget. So yeah, we're talking $500 to $600 million. We're nearly in $500 million mark according to the source. Yep. And this rumor has some significant validity to it, given Caroline Reeds over at Forbes reported that Disney's production company, the United Kingdom, working on Snow White, had already spent $209.3 million over the 3 years, and that was as July of 2022. Literally over 2 years ago at the time. And they've been constantly working on this movie ever since. This movie is easily a $500 million budget after everything is said and done, if not longer than that. It's been over 2 years since that report, and now we know that at least one confirmed reshoot from Gal Gadot. She posted a figure of the actor in her Instagram story saying, "Feels good to be back." We've known that from that kind of thing out there. It's obviously one of them situations. They're talking about giant reshoots. This is another source that said this. Disney is planning to reshoot the film because they literally went from ambiguous magical persons back to Seven Dwarfs. Did Disney come to their senses? To a little bit, but if at the end of the day, it's not whether or not Disney has come to their senses. They know that this path that they've been walking down doesn't sell. People want one-to-one recreations of what they've known and loved. It's worked out for literal decades with anime and manga. They stick to the source material. They make things a one-for-one recreation for it and expand it out to a broader audience, and then end up making their mangas extremely successful as well. But that is something that Western Hollywood entertainment people have felt that they're just too narcissistic for it, right? They're just too narcissistic. They want to make it their own. They want to reimagine it in their own image. And this has been something that we have seen consistently from the Walt Disney Company for decades, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be the Pixar, whether it be their animation stuff. Instead of trying to stick to the source material, trying to give us good quality stuff that we relate to, that feels familiar and ends up selling really, really well. No, instead they decided to go their own way. They decided to listen to their own agenda. They decided to listen to their own narcissism, and it is blown up in their faces time and time again. This is a company who has lost billions of dollars over the last few years between streaming services and theatrical runs, and it's all because they decided to double down on a DEI agenda, and is now blown up in their faces time and time again. Snow White will not be saved by any of these reshoots, any of this rebudgets, any of the rest of the stuff. This movie will end up being a disastrous dumpster fire at the box office, and I cannot wait until March when it premieres and I can report to you that the Walt Disney Company will end up losing over $500 million at least on their DEI initiative ran Snow White and the 7 really weird, creepy-looking, homeless hobo people we don't even know at this point. But Disney Snow Brown will absolutely fail, and at the end of the day, they've done it to themselves, and they will get exactly what they deserve. Scramble to save it all you want. It will fail.